All right, so in this video, I'm going to go over some major changes with respect to your next bit of learning, your next task or tasks, and I'm going to make a very powerful introduction to a new lesson that you will not get in your reading that you will be applying for a grade. So the first thing I want to say is that while task 1 is the same, it includes a new demonstration argument, the argument itself being a complex one. This will help remind you of things that you need to remember, warnings, tips that I gave you when it came to complex arguments. Now, you might not have a complex argument when it comes to the markup and reformatting for task 1 that you will be doing. Even then, 90%, 95% of what I go through still applies to your simple argument. Now, let's focus on task 2. Task 2 does still have you making connections between your own thoughts and something you learned about ethics in virtue of doing the reading on ethics. Remember that ethics is a branch of philosophy itself being a discipline. However, task 2 now includes practical lessons that you will not find in the book that you can use to more clearly, more accurately, and more precisely analyze arguments about issues of moral significance, where right and wrong, or rightness and wrongness, goodness and badness are of concern. These lessons are useful in the context of COVID-19 and how the world, nations, states, counties, cities, and individuals have responded to, are responding to, and will continue to respond to the virus, as well as how all these entities responded to each other's responses to the virus. And of course, not only did I list or cite, responses with respect to the world, nations, states, cities, and then of course individuals, but we can also think in terms of various kinds of institution. So for example, education, four-year colleges, two-year colleges, specific ones like Dallas College, K through 12, elementaries, districts, of course, places of business, sports, all those kinds of things, religious organizations. So some questions, some sample questions, moral issues that arise from COVID-19 include, but are not at all limited to the following. Is it wrong to hoard things like toilet paper and sanitizer? If so, on what basis is it wrong to hoard those things? And if it's not wrong to hoard those things in the midst of a pandemic like COVID-19, how would you respond to someone who thinks it does? How would you meet a moral argument or a moral objection that it's wrong to hoard toilet paper? What kind of logic or reasoning could you give for that? Now, imagine this. You gave your aunt or an aunt or somebody a hug 3 days ago. And you found out just this morning that this person that you gave a hug to, okay, and let's say you hugged them for 5 seconds and then you spoke in their proximity within 2 feet of standing of them. You just found out that she's tested positive for COVID-19 just this morning. Would it be morally permissible for you to show up to work and interact with customers and coworkers? How would you object to someone who said it's not morally permissible, that it's wrong, that you have an obligation to stay home and self-quarantine? For that matter, is it wrong to not self-quarantine when you know you've been in contact with somebody who has COVID-19? Is it necessarily wrong? Do you have a stronger obligation to self-quarantine if you know you have COVID-19 versus just knowing that you were around somebody that has COVID-19? What reasons could you give in responding and stating your position, offering a conclusion with respect to those questions? What about this? Do you think we have duties? Do you think that sometimes we just have to do certain things because they're right in and of themselves, and hence it's a duty? If you do you think we have a duty to protect life? Like some people talk about the right to life, right? We have a duty to protect life. People who are anti-abortion or pro-life are against abortion because they say they're pro-life. Some people are the same way when it comes to capital punishment. But one thing that we might consider is that when it comes to wearing masks and social distancing, is that part of, and do we have to respond to those kinds of calls upon us as citizens to make sure that we really are committed to a principle when it comes to the right to life? So again, do we have a duty to protect life? If so, does this extend to a duty to protect life by wearing masks and social distancing? Do we have a duty to provide for ourselves and our families by going to whatever jobs we have to earn a living? If both are duties, does one take priority over another? If so, which one or how so? How do you decide if something's a duty? How do you decide the extent to your duty? If you run into conflicting duties, as in the scenario that I've just given you now, or in the questioning that I've just given you now, what reasoning or on what basis do you decide which duties to override another one? How do we resolve a potential when it comes to a conflict in moral duty or conflict in moral values for that matter? And then, of course, there's a question that I had you focus on for this class, a moral question. Did governments at various levels, or did government do the right thing, or was it morally permissible in making people wear masks or shelter in place? Why or why not? So I think the way that I had you respond to that concern that has arisen from COVID-19 and the pandemic is, was it morally permissible for government to make you shelter in place? Another way that we can phrase the question a little bit differently is, did governments at various levels do the right thing in making people wear masks or shelter in place? Now, I had you focus on what? Sheltering in place? Or did I have you focus on wearing masks? I can't remember. I think it was sheltering in place, but we could also ask the question about wearing masks, right? But shelter in place is the action that was much more widely implemented and or enforced. So these are just some of the questions that give rise to call our attention to the moral issues and concerns arising from something, a health concern, a non-moral issue that is COVID-19 pandemic. What makes COVID-19 of moral concern is how we respond to it. Now, your ability to think through these issues, these questions, is much improved through the philosophical study of ethics and my particular take on moral statements, non-moral statements, moral arguments, and non-moral arguments. And this is and will be the focus of Task 2 instruction. Your ability to recognize when someone in any debate of moral concern, including the debate about COVID-19 and our responses to it, that is the pandemic, your ability to recognize when someone in any debate of moral concern is making a moral claim or non-moral claim is really important. Your ability to recognize when someone is focused on the non-moral elements of the debate is really important to thinking critically with others through and about issues such as those arising, moral issues such as those arising from COVID-19. You want to be able to discern, to figure out, to realize that maybe someone's using a general moral rule or moral principle or value, or that they're trying to persuade you to accept their particular moral judgment on an issue or a question. Learning about these things, these new terms that you're hearing me express through this little introductory lecture, will actually help you understand what you learned about ethics as well. That is about moral theory, such as utilitarianism and duty ethics, even better. Believe me when I say that a genuine attempt to work through the Task 2 lessons will empower you, whether it's presenting your views to family members during the upcoming holidays, analyzing points of view you can encounter in other classes or various news outlets, or evaluating the logic of arguments you see on social media. I was going to make Task 2 mainly about connecting an ethical theory to a Week 2 response, but I think the lessons I have included are of such importance that connecting to ethical theory has been streamlined and now only constitute only half of this task. That said, Task 2 will still count as a theory connection task. I'm okay with this, since the new lessons, not covered in the book or in a soft talk module, actually help you to understand the theories you did learn about and will discuss in some way.